Well, of course.
But see, the question here, though, is though, but it's not a question of just money. It's a question of what is right and what is wrong. If Trump is willing to pay this money, are you willing to say that Trump is wrong on this issue?
Well, I don't know if the president was involved in it or not.
He's willing to pay the money.
Let me just read to you what.
Abby Phillips of CNN had Cornel West on to go up against a panel that included MAGA clown Scott Jennings. Now, if you're not familiar with Scott Jennings, he is a smirking, eye-rolling MAGA creep, and he's one of the worst on television, in my opinion. So why don't we take a look at this clip of Cornel West, Scott Jennings, and Abby Phillips on CNN. I'll share my opinions, and then I want to know what you think in the comments.
Tonight, settlement shock. The Trump administration has agreed to pay nearly $5 million to the family of Ashli Babbitt. She is the MAGA rioter who was shot and killed by police after she breached the Capitol on January 6th. The officer who was involved was later cleared of criminal wrongdoing. In a statement today, the Capitol Police chief said he is disappointed with the settlement and that it, quote, sends a chilling message to law enforcement nationwide, especially to those with a protective mission like ours. Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Harry Dunn, a former U.S. Capitol Police officer who was there on January 6th. Harry, great to see you. Thanks for being here. Look, this is unbelievable in a way, especially if you were there. We covered it. To see this moment rewarded with a $5 million settlement, when we checked, we tried to see, were there officers who were injured, those who died as a result of their injuries or other aspects of their service on January 6th? Did they get anything? No settlements for those folks.
Not even money, but just even an acknowledgement. I'm just thinking about Brian Signick. His mother still waiting for a call from the president. Look, it's under no circumstances, should anybody's death be celebrated or somebody lost their daughter, somebody lost a sister, a mother, and it's unfortunate that somebody lost their life there. But what message does it send that an individual, if she lived, she would have been charged. She would have been charged with a crime. She would have been a criminal. What message does that send out there to not just everyday citizens, but to people other criminals at the Capitol who may have been sprayed by police or may have been hit by police? Do they get to sue and now be rewarded because their record's clean with Donald Trump pardoning them?
Yeah, I mean, those are important sort of downstream effects of all this. I mean, does this open the door, Scott, to all these other people suing the police officers that they assaulted?
Yeah, I mean, he raises legitimate questions. I mean, it's a tragic situation because someone died. And it's also a tragic situation because brave police officers were put in harm's way. I'm very defensive of police officers. I back the blue. I think police officers protect us and deserve our support and our admiration. So that's my view.
Scott Jennings is trying to thread the needle here because he is running for office. So he doesn't want to upset the police too much because he's going to go with the back the blue thing, but he also doesn't want to upset people who side with the January 6 rioters, which is most of MAGA. And, if you stop and think about this, there's been so much sane washing and rewriting history around January 6th. I watched it play out that day, right? I thought to myself, this is an insurrection. You can't say it was love and a peaceful whatever. Watch the footage. If I'm sure that people on the right didn't watch the January 6th report, and they're sort of like, well, what about all the stuff that wasn't violent? The stuff that wasn't violent wasn't the problem, right? It wasn't the problem. And Trump gets back into office and he pardons all of them, including the violent people who harmed police officers. It's just not American. It's not the America that I want to live in. Sure, it's imperfect. There's lots of problems with our country, which is why I want to elect politicians that are always committed to trying to make it better for all Americans. And I know that there are 35 million voters who will support Donald Trump no matter what he does, because it's a cult at this point. It's a cult mentality. But, Ashli Babbitt, I'm not glad that she's dead. I'm not going to say she deserved to die, but she was a part of a mob that was engaging in an insurrection, violently breaking into the Capitol, and she got shot. So she's not a martyr. She's not a hero. I think that paying her the $5 million in a settlement is more about Trump throwing meat to his base than it is about any sort of justice. And what's really flabbergasting to me is that half of our government who was in the building, there's that Josh Hawley footage of him sort of skedoodling out of there. Like, they were there. They were under threat themselves. And now they're sort of like, well, I don't. They're either very silent or they're actively engaging in the sane washing and the whitewashing. I can't get my head around it.
This should have never happened. On the settlement, look, they were asking for 30. They got 5. I don't know all the facts internally. I've just seen the reporting about whether they thought maybe a jury would side with her. I don't know.
But
I don't. So it's hard for me to know what facts they were looking at internally about what litigation might have produced. But it is in my opinion, a tragic situation for everyone. The person who died, the police officer who was involved, who, by the way, was vindicated in internal reports and internal investigations.
Well, that's the point that I want to make. So it was a wrongful death settlement. What was wrong then? If he wasn't charged, he was cleared in multiple investigations. What was wrong?
I am a supporter of the police, but my support of the police doesn't only occur on January 6th. Are we not aware that these kind of cases happen all the time? In fact, New York City just settled a $13 million case after George Floyd protest. People that assaulted police officers here in New York City got $13.5 million.
What does that make it okay? We don't need whataboutisms right now.
I'm not whataboutism. Okay. I'm not. I'm not a January 6th, I wish I was their guy. I'm not that at all. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying we should be clear that people who are the victims of police mistreatment have a right to sue. This sort of thing does happen all the time. Cornel, you are routinely.
I think that's the question. Is she a victim of police mistreatment?
People who are the victims of a police shooting, right or wrong, have a right to sue in this country.
Okay, but is she a victim of police mistreatment?
Exactly.
According to the settlement, she is.
Well, but see, the question here, though, but it's not a question of just money. It's a question of what is right and what is wrong. If Trump is willing to pay this money, are you willing to say that Trump is wrong on this issue?
Well, I don't know if the president was involved in it or not.
He's willing to pay the money.
Let me just read to you what he said about.
Because let me just say this.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is it's hard for us to be able to generate the kind of bonds of trust that we must have if people are not willing to stand on principle and integrity as opposed to just being on one team and being hard on the other team and somebody else on the other team being hard on the other team. Right and wrong cuts deeper than the team.
But she's talking about what's right
and what's wrong.
Professor West, does she have the right to sue?
Well, she didn't sue because
sure she has the right to sue. Of course she has the right to sue.
Is she justified doing it?
She has a right to do it, and it goes through a process, and we see whether it's right or whether it's wrong.
No, she wasn't justified. No, what do you mean? Wrongful death is what she sued her state sued for.
But people can sue for anything and be wrong,
I understand that, but I'm saying he was cleared in those investigations.
Right.
So what's wrongful? An investigation by the FBI and Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police turned up zero wrongdoing.
No evidence.
So what is wrongful about this settlement?
There's another case here in New York where.
Yeah, I agree with the former Capitol police officer in Cornel West. Of course, people can sue for all kinds of things. That's one of the freedoms we have in America. And Donald Trump, look at all the lawsuits that he's filed. And some he wins, and some he doesn't. And yet he accuses everyone else of lawfare. That's precisely what he engages. He's an incredibly litigious person. So people can sue for all kinds of things, for better or for worse in this country. But that doesn't mean that even if they win, it's right. You know, I mean, there's a moral thing and then there's a legal thing. And ideally, they're aligned. We've shown again and again in the country, and again, Donald Trump is the biggest example of this, that a legal victory does not equate to a moral victory. And Cornel West talking about the partisanship, right? Which team we're on. That's precisely the point. We need to get back to clearing our heads and realizing that what's important is what is right and what is wrong. And I don't mean right like right and left, obviously. What is morally correct and virtuous versus what is morally corrupt and wrong. And so much of our politics these days is just about partisan gamesmanship, regardless of right and wrong. And people are dug in like ticks to support whatever color flag their team has. It's not the point. And, you know, with Jeffrey Epstein, we're seeing this whipsaw around. Jeffrey Epstein was a criminal, and people were victimized. And to try and sweep it all under the rug because you don't want it to be your president or the other team doesn't want it because of their president, right? If Donald Trump is implicated, if Bill Clinton is implicated, it's criminal. And I think we should pull all that out and look at it because that's the right thing to do. And people should be held accountable. So with Ashli Babbitt, an officer was doing his job as a mob breached the Capitol. It's been through the court system. It was determined that it was not an unlawful shooting. And I don't know, bringing up other municipalities that have to pay out for cops who kill unarmed people or beat up, it's not the same thing at all. I mean, you're comparing an apple and an orange. So when Cornel West says to Scott Jennings, are you just going to be on the team or are you just going to be on the side of what's right, what's correct, what's moral? That to me is the crux of it.
An officer was, the shooting was found to have been done by the book. The guy's name was Ramarley Grant. I don't think he should die. I don't want the guy to die. The police officer was not charged. It was done by the patrol guide of the NYPD. And that guy got $4 million, okay? I'm against massive police settlements for victims when the officer is not at fault. I'm with you on this. I just don't know why we're so shocked and appalled when this family, who was the victim of a police shooting, I don't think she should have died.
Because it happened one of the darkest days in our American history.
I'll tell you why. Can I just...
Does she deserve to die?
No. Can I tell you why, though?
Yeah.
Because this insurrection was perpetuated by the same person whose administration settled this case. So it's not like there was some jury or there was some sort of independent body that gave her this money. This money was given to her by the man who even Scott Jennings at one point said incited this insurrection. His name is Donald Trump.
No, it's coming from taxpayers.
Well, it is coming from taxpayers.
Trump should pay her.
Donald Trump is the person who allowed that to happen.
And he has been on this issue for a long time. Here's what he said about the officer, actually, who shot Ashli Babbitt. He said the police officer thug who had a very checkered past to begin with was not just doing his job when he shot and killed great patriot Ashli Babbitt at point blank range. And then he says that she was murdered. He called the officer a thug who was there protecting members of Congress, Democrat and Republican. The thing about the Ashli Babbitt situation is that we actually saw it. We saw the tape of it. We saw that they were trying to break into the chambers where lawmakers were hiding for their lives.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
That happened because he was protecting our elected leaders. That is not within question here.
Republicans and Democrats.
Here in New York, routinely, Democratic elected officials routinely call the members of the NYPD thugs. Why do we always treat this one incident with a different lens than the broader issue of the police being assaulted?
Assault on law enforcement in the history of the United States.
It probably isn't. It probably isn't.
But Joe, is it really being...
I'm not trying to one up you there.
Is it really being treated with a different lens, except by the people who are running for office on a back the blue platform?
You're talking to me.
That's what I'm saying. I think that on January 7th, there was almost unanimity that this was an awful day, that the people who were involved in it should be prosecuted. Almost everybody agreed with that. The only reason that changed is because Donald Trump wanted it to change. And because Donald Trump was on the other side of that issue, all the back the blue people have changed their stance. I agree with you that people should be consistent, but I think the lack of consistency is not where you're where you think it is?
I think there were definitely people who were completely overcharged for their participation. I think people that assaulted police officers on video, on camera, easily provable, should be punished and should spend time in jail. I'm consistent. Right, I said the same thing last segment when we were talking about the Congresswoman. I'm saying the same thing this segment.
If you were in the Oval Office, I think maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But Donald Trump is in the Oval Office. He has pardoned all of these people, including the ones who assaulted police officers. And now his Justice Department has handed down a $5 million settlement in this case.
Why is there such a big deal being made of this case? A big deal has been made of this case because an entire political movement, MAGA, half of our government, led by their cult leader, Donald Trump, has turned it into a huge deal. And like Abby Phillips is saying here, Donald Trump called his police officer a thug. They're very, very different, separate issues comparing police violence in the streets of, when there is a demonstration going on and a Capitol police officer doing his job and trying to protect the Congress people inside. But this is one of the problems that MAGA has right now is they're back the blue, but with an asterisk. It's back the blue when it's blue that's on their team. And if it's blue that isn't on their team, not one of Donald Trump's stormtroopers, then we don't back those blue. So, support our police as long as they're the right kind of police. And that's not how it's supposed to work.
I think the sad thing is when you have larger patterns of might makes right, of Pontius Pilate over Jesus, of Thrasymachus over Socrates, people figure it's all transaction, it's all manipulation, it's all the survival of the slickest. Once you have that dominant in your society, after a while, it doesn't make any difference what's on the books because nobody is taking the book seriously anyway. Rule of law doesn't mean that much. Constitution doesn't mean that much. Quality relations doesn't mean that much.
Harry,
conversations don't mean that.
Do you feel that way? The rule of law has less meaning now?
Last week being National Police Week, the White House tweeted whatever it is. We support and will never betray our men and women in law. Which ones? The ones that voted for you? Like this is about right and wrong. And like you could turn off all the talking heads. You can turn off all the news, everybody's opinion about January 6th. Hell, watch it on mute. Just press play. Just press play. Everybody watched and had a front row seat to watch what happened with Ashli Babbitt, to watch what happened to everybody in the Capitol that day. You don't need anybody's opinion. Just press play. And anybody that can side with those individuals, they got the nerve to call themselves patriots, and they were right. They're attempting to rewrite what happened that day, and that continues with Donald Trump, with this Justice Department awarding Ashli Babbitt's family $5 million. That is coming from taxpayer money. Ashli Babbitt wouldn't have been there if Donald Trump would have accepted that the election was not stolen. So maybe Donald Trump should pay that $5 million himself instead of the American people.
Well, Harry, whenever I see you, I always say thank you for your heroism that day and for your service. Thank you for being on the show.
That's a great line, survival of the slickest. Cornel West is a good orator. He's a great talker. I admire that. Let me know what you think in the comments.